Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? I'm back with another podcast. Before we get into it, I want to put out a thank you to Penn City Current and Chuck Vandenberg for putting out an article about me, helping my podcast grow. They're awesome over there. They provide good news for Southeast Iowa. I'm going to leave a link in the description below this video to their Facebook page, so like that if you haven't, and also to their website. They've been hurt by the pandemic that's going on right now, and supporting local business is extremely important right now. So if you can just go over there and give them some ad traffic, that'd be amazing. And also I want to throw in a caveat that 80% of the people who watch these are not subscribed, and I'll put a little graphic on the screen right now. So if you want to help my channel grow, you want to help me reach more people, please go ahead and subscribe. It's free, and it'll let you know when I upload. But with that stuff being said and all that crap out of the way, let's get into today's guest, Coach Andrew Troxel, formerly from Fort Madison, Richland Center first, then Fort Madison, and now back in his hometown, Richland Center. I'll let him give a little background about himself and what he does, and then we'll get rolling.
Well, first of all, Sam, it's a pleasure to be here. I've watched some of the videos that you've done with other coaches, and so it's an honor to be, interviewed with the likes of some very effective and successful coaches. Like you said, I grew up in Richland Center, Wisconsin. It's a small town in southwestern Wisconsin. There's about 5,000 people or so. Went to school at UW La Crosse, and then in 2008, during the Great Recession, decided it was a good time to get a job. And I applied all over the country, and I don't even know how many applications I sent out, everywhere from the Carolinas, I think a couple to Kentucky, Iowa, and then ended up kind of going out west somewhere too. But ended up finding my first job in Fort Madison, Iowa, and just spent under 10 years there. And had a lot of great experiences, I've developed a lot of great friendships with people, and met some really outstanding students as well. So was there for a while, and then an opportunity opened up to kind of move back home and be closer to family and teach where I went to school. So it's been really cool to kind of be back in the hallways on the other side of the fence, teaching at my alma mater.
Yeah, awesome, and I could not be more happy for you being back to where you are. I think it's every teacher's dream, at least most people want to go back to where they came from because of family, like you said, and also because it's cool to be on the other side and to kind of see, to kind of help people in your community grow. I think that's an amazing thing.
Mm-hmm.
So did you always want to be a teacher when you went to college? Was that your plan from the get-go, or did you have something different in mind?
I had a feeling in 8th grade that I wanted to go into education. And I think the catalyst really for me in my journey in education started really with a coach that really took a special interest in not only just me, but a lot of people that were kind of like me. I wasn't the best athlete in the world, but I worked hard. I hustled. I was a kid that always got the hustle award, right? And, what I found is that he always tried to find, the positive in the silver lining when things weren't the greatest. I remember one time I was taking a penalty kick in a soccer game, and I completely missed, but you can hear this guy on the sideline saying, "Oh, it's close, it's going to go." And everybody's like, "What are you talking about?" But I mean, it was just that positivity. It gave you that, kind of that understanding of how valuable you are as a person, and just an increased amount of self-worth. And I'm like, you know what, I like this feeling, and I like that I could have the opportunity to really kind of pour into the lives of a lot of other kids. And so in 8th grade, I knew I wanted to go into education. I wasn't certain exactly where that was going to take me, what discipline, because it's hard to figure out life when you're, 14 years old, 18 years old, heck, in your mid-20s, you're still trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
And so, I just knew I wanted to go into education, and through my journey, I encountered some people that really influenced me to eventually go into the social sciences.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into my next question is why social studies? Because me and you are extremely alike in that we love social studies, we love social sciences, all of them. So why social studies? Is it just that you have a love for that kind of stuff and that kind of knowledge?
Initially, I really like science.
Okay.
Science was very hands-on. It's very exciting. You can kind of understand, the different chain reactions or different phenomena that are happening in the world. And it really wasn't until my freshman year in college, I took a geography class. And that was the first time that I was exposed to kind of human geography And human geography is amazing. You know, it's one of my favorite classes to teach. I'm an AP.
Yeah. Wait, hold on. One second. Look at this. I don't know if you can see this shirt. AP Human Geography with Troxel right there. I don't want to throw off your thought, but I thought that might come up, and I thought it would make a funny moment, so I decided to wear the shirt just in case. Perfect.
I feel like I should trademark that look now.
Yeah.
But no, I had an amazing professor, and you know, human geography really kind of brings in a lot of the different elements of just understanding how humans behave. So you got elements of kind of economics and politics, you know, and you take a look at agriculture and international politics. I mean, just it's a bunch of different things that kind of, you know, come together around the same time. And so this guy really showed me the passion of why things are happening in kind of the in current events and stuff like that. And I'm like, I never really thought of that before. And what that did is that opened up this whole desire of understanding, you know, how historical events or how current events were really interconnected in this crazy web, you know. And so that's one of the things that I found out about social studies. The deeper I dug, the more I read, the more I watched, I found more connections between things. And I'm like, this is a fascinating discipline, because you can start to see, you know, how all these different forces kind of act upon people, act upon groups and countries, and really kind of influence their behavior. And so that's why I love what I do. That's why I love the social sciences, because you can explore those questions that we've tried to tackle for thousands of years, and it's really haven't changed a whole lot.
Yeah. So would you say that like human geography is your favorite subject in the social sciences, or because like I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but there's a large range. Like I'm sure McGackie would say his favorite is like sociology or psychology, and then you know you could have human geography, and then I could have like 1800s history or something. There's such a large range of subjects. So would you say that human geography is definitely your passion, like sort of on a narrower scope?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think that's because it brings in a lot of the other social sciences. You know, so you see elements of every other social science. I mean, the history is vital in explaining, you know, how countries are the way they are, and what you know motivates them to act the way they do with other countries. You know, you look at the economics and that relationship. You know, and I just think that this makes, you know, the world that we live in extremely relevant by looking at that stuff. You know, and everybody's going to have their own niche, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You know, I just feel like AP Human Geography pulls everything together.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. So as a teacher, what is a favorite activity of yours out of the millions of activities that you do in your class? Because I can say one thing that I remember the most about you being my teacher is that we did an activity almost daily, like a hands-on activity where it's like drawing a map or doing all these kind of crazy different things that are really cool and really engage people. So what would you say your favorite activity is?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. You're right. I mean, that's part of my educational philosophy a little bit, is that you've got to have hands-on and minds-on, you know, with everything that you do. And so finding those activities oftentimes is difficult, because a lot of those I make from scratch. You know, I'm inspired by something I read, something I watch, you know, something that's shared with me, and I just kind of take it to a level that I think is appropriate for my kids. I remember early on in my career, we would mummify chickens. And so we were talking about Egyptian burial processes and Egyptian culture. We would go through that process. I love maps. And so you're right with AP Human Geography. I've got a floor-to-ceiling map in my classroom, and I cover that with plastic. So every unit, we take different phenomena, and we plot it out. And so then we talk about trends and patterns. You know, the way the social study standards are written now, they're more about kind of making claims and defending those claims with evidence. And so we're doing quite a bit of work with primary sources. Okay. And so that's always interesting to have kids make a stand. But I would say with all those things, probably my most favorite activity is something called the spiderweb discussion. And a spiderweb discussion essentially poses some kind of question. Typically, it's a controversial question where it asks kids to take a stand, right? You know, we want kids to be able to have this civic discourse. And so if you pose the question and have them put themselves out there, now they've got to go ahead and not only defend that claim, they've got to kind of look at other people's arguments and scrutinize that and agree or disagree. And what I found is that that kids or students today are really striving that communication and that connection with their peers. You know, I mean, we're connected on social media all over the place, but this is a whole new level, and it's a very rich conversation of back and forth, and that's probably the biggest activity that a lot of my kids come out of my class really are thankful that we did that, and they want to do more of that.
Yeah, and you know, I'm an example of that because that was by far my favorite thing that we did in your class. And I said when I was thinking about because I know I'm going to go into education, but I was thinking about activities that I want to do because I think me and you kind of align on the philosophy of hands-on, minds-on, and stuff like that. But one thing that I said that I'm for sure going to do probably weekly is spiderweb discussion, just because it's like it's just awesome. You got to put yourself out there and you got to defend a claim, and it's just and against your peers more. You know what I mean? These people who you're trying to connect with socially your entire life, and you might end up arguing with them a little bit, but that's that's part of life. You argue and you come to a ground, you come to a stance, and that's awesome to do, especially as a high schooler.
Yeah, you know, and I think there's a big shift within social studies education right now, and I know Iowa has adopted new state standards. You know, Wisconsin in the last couple of years has adopted these new state standards, and they've really gotten away from content, but they're really focused on things like these inquiry methods and civic discourse and things like that. And so I think as we kind of head into the future, you know, and equipping the next generation, it's not what you know, it's what you can do with that knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of, you know, it's fun to tackle that stuff, but at the same time, you're completely in uncharted territory, and there's not a lot of guidance with how to approach these things. But I think when you find something that works for kids, they crave it, they love it, and that's exactly what they want to do because they're immersed in the world, right?
Yeah.
And if they can know their stuff and back it up and know where to find the credible information and kind of decipher what's not legit, you know, I mean, that's where we're doing kids favors, you know, not, you know, tell me who, what, when, where, you know, in 1486.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And also it drives learning too, because, you know, somebody might go into class one day and not have any idea about the Israel Palestine conflict, for example, but then maybe they do quick Google search. They have a stance in their mind already, but maybe they Google search it and they learn more and more about it, and then they're ready for the discussion. So it's the perfect activity to do, to be 100% honest. So kind of switching gears a little bit, and we kind of touched on this already. What drives you when it comes to teaching?
You know, that's a very deep question, man. I feel like I should have got this in advance. I think when it comes to education, you know, I always wanted, and this is so cliche, you know, I always wanted to change the world. And I think a lot of people that come out of education initially, that's exactly what they want to do. And education's a very kind of entrenched area. There's not a whole lot of change. It takes a while to change things, and really kind of you're working with people that might like your content, might not like your content. And so I don't know, over the course of 10 years now, I think I'm going into my 11th year of teaching, is my philosophy more or less is to be a changer of worlds. Instead of to change the world, because that's tough. I mean, you take on a lot of pressure, you know, from outside forces and stuff, but to be a changer of worlds, I can find that one kid, you know, or a handful of kids, and I can really pour into them, you know, because a lot of these kids, and I think it's mentioned in previous episodes that you've done with the teachers, don't come from the best background, you know, and so I can be that person that's a cheerleader for them, you know, if I can be that, you know, that person that's going to inspire them or hold them accountable or something like that, you know, I'm cool with that. And if I know that one person's life has been altered in a positive way because of the small part that I played in their journey, I can sleep well at night. You know, that's why I love what I do.
Awesome. My next question was why Fort Madison, but we already touched on that. It was the Great Recession, and you needed a job, so that's kind of where that goes. Maybe talk a little. Maybe have you ever before you came to Fort Madison to teach? Did you know Have you ever heard of Fort Madison? Probably not.
No way.
No,
not at all. It was kind of funny because my buddy, he had just gotten a job in Iowa, and he was teaching at West Branch, just outside the Iowa City area. And I remember we went and visited him because he got a job before I did. I spent a year doing construction, and I'm like, man, we are so far into Iowa, you know. I didn't realize there was like another half of Iowa.
Yeah.
So I remember my interview that day. I stayed at his house in Iowa City, and I just traveled south. You know, it takes like an hour and 15 minutes or so to, you know, get to Fort Madison. But I actually coasted into Fort Madison on fumes. I was running out of gas. I had an interview in 20 minutes, and I'm like, oh, please make it to the Shell gas station so I can fill up. And yeah, I made it. And then I, you know, to make a kind of a long story short, ended up then spending the next 9 years teaching at Fort Madison in some capacity.
Yeah. So what would you say are some cultural differences between maybe Wisconsin and Iowa as a whole that you've noticed because you've lived a pretty good amount of time in both, and maybe even in the two towns that you lived in that you noticed?
Okay. Well, I think kids are kids, to be honest with you. So it doesn't matter, you know, if you're in, you know, rural Iowa or rural Wisconsin, you know, I mean, you're going to find the specific archetypes no matter what. I would say that looking at Fort Madison, Iowa, compared to Richland Center, Wisconsin, I mean, both are working class communities. And I think that brings a lot of strength, you know, to the type of kids that we got. I mean, every town has their issues, don't get me wrong, you know, but you see a lot of perseverance and a lot of grit, you know, with people that come from those settings. I can tell you, you know, kids from Fort Madison and kids from Richland Center, you know, I'm going to find a handful of kids are going to work their tail off for me. And because of that work ethic that's been instilled in them from their parents or, you know, other adult figures in their life, I mean, they're going to be successful. So I would say it's actually a fairly close comparison with both communities.
Yeah. How is Richland Center as a whole? If you had to give a synopsis or whatever, for lack of a better term, what would you say is the direction of your football program that you've taken over, and the direction of your high school as a whole academically?
Okay. Well, let me talk about kind of the academic side of things, and then we'll switch and we'll start talking about athletics. If that's all right with you. I think academically right now is we have a very great staff. In Wisconsin, there's a award. There's a lot of awards that are given out, but one of the most prestigious awards is the Cole Fellowship. And so, you know, you have a lot of teachers that across the state apply for this, and we've got, I think, 3 in our building, which speaks to the caliber and the quality of the staff that we have at RCHS. And then even if they're not, you know, a recipient of that award, you know, we have a tremendous staff. You know, a lot of it is a fairly young staff and people that are progressive in looking towards kind of how to make education better, you know, how to make sure that it aligns with standards and kind of the direction where we're going here as a state. So it's fantastic. I love my department. You know, one of the guys, he was my teacher in high school social studies. And the other one, he's a couple years older than I, but he's kind of a non-traditional teacher, and he's a rock star. Like literally, he's a rock star. He rocks out. He plays the guitar, and he's just an awesome influence to have, you know, as a colleague. And so we just really kind of share. It's an open setting, and it's fantastic. So I like where we're headed. I think we're still working on that philosophy of who we are and what we want our kids to do, but that'll come, you know. But I think we're pointing in the right direction.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so like you said, let's go ahead and switch gears and let's talk about coaching. So maybe give a little rundown about where your program is headed right now.
Okay. So my first head coach was Todd McGackie, and he used to have this funny ism. He's got a lot of isms, you know. Yeah. He would always say, you know, that's like the worst or the best in the United States of America, right? And it was always just kind of over dramatizing it. It was funny. We got a laugh out of it. Well, when it came to the Richland Center football program, it literally was one of the worst programs in America. I think it was in the top 10 for losing programs. We had like a 40+ losing streak, you know, for a while, and that takes a toll on a program, you know. And so I looked at that, because when I graduated, we were not like that. We were one of the top programs in the state of Wisconsin, you know. And so you just kind of I looked at what football did for me, you know, and how grateful I am for that. And then you look at how it just kind of fell off the rails here, you know, and that really pulls at your heartstring. And like you talked about earlier, you know, every kid just wants to represent their hometown to the best of their ability, you know. And so when there was an opportunity to go back and really pour in and revitalize this program, oh man, I mean, that was my my kind of defining factor in moving back to this area. It was hard, because things were going great at Fort Madison. There were some great kids, still are some great kids there, and we had some good things going in the right direction, but I just felt called that this is where I needed to be.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. So maybe talk a little bit about what your first head coaching position is like, because I believe that you were always the offensive line coach, right? When you coached previously. So talk about that switch and what that's been like.
Yeah, good question. So I would say I did offensive line, or I was a position coach, O and D line, for my first 10 years of coaching. And then when I came up here in 2018, I was the offensive coordinator. And that was a big shift, because as a position coach, you're just focused on, 5, 6 guys, maybe what happens in the box or something like that. But now we're looking at an entire offensive scheme. So I went from looking at D-line alignment versus where linebackers are at to, okay, still got to throw in corners and safety. Oh, man. So
Yeah.
I still remember the first couple of plays I called, and it was scary,
Yeah.
But you get a hang of it and you just start to read, the defense easier. And so in the course of one season, it got a lot better, and as we went in then from 2018 to 2019, I was named the head coach, for the program. And that off season was so valuable. We took a look at everything. We scrutinized absolutely everything that we did. We made some changes with the personnel, and some of that went really well. And some of it didn't, people kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit. But I think right now I've got a tremendous staff. They're great character guys, they're great position coaches and coordinators. And so really, to be honest with you, because they're so invested in this program, it's just we have the shared goal, to kind of make sure that this program is competitive once again. And I mean, they work their tails off, and it's just fun to work with them.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. How is the pandemic that obviously everybody's going through right now, how has that affected the coaching side of things?
So right now, I mean, it's tough. It's tough on everybody. Our weight room involvement was next to nothing when I came here. And now it's really gone through the roof, and we have a lot of kids that are buying in. And I mean, their numbers are impressive, not only for where they're at, but also just kind of in relation to their peers from other schools. And so we had a lot of buy-in there, and things were going great. Middle school kids were coming in. And so then this hit, and it shuts down everything. And so that really puts a lot of stress on our off-season development, but to our kids' credit, I've got wonderful kids. I mean, they're fantastic. They're finding ways to stay strong. We've got farm kids up here that are flipping tires, carrying tires. We got kids that are making, squat racks out of buckets and bricks, things like that. And they're just finding ways to be active. And again, that's kind of a testament to this community that, I mean, they're going to work hard, and okay, yeah, I got a pandemic. It ain't going to stop us.
Yeah.
We're going to find a way to be successful. And that's the mantra and the belief that these kids have. And, it's awesome,
Yeah.
So it's not what we want right now. And can we do better? Absolutely. But, they could also be staying at home doing absolutely nothing. And those are not what my kids are doing.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. How has the balance between obviously being a head coach now and family life been? I know right now you're obviously spending a lot of time with your family, but even being an offensive coordinator and just coaching in general, how is that balance between being a coach and then coming home and having a family?
Well, I've got 2 young kids. My daughter is 8 and my son is 5. And so when I'm home, they just want to be with dad. They don't care about the game plan. They don't care about, what happened at work. And so, when I come home, I've got to set those boundaries. And some days are really good. And some days, there's a lot to juggle, and so to my family's credit, they've been able to kind of ebb and flow with the demands of the job. And they're very supportive. The season is tough as a offensive coordinator and a head coach, because there's a lot to do. but what we've done is we've earmarked, specific times during the weekend where I'm just dad.
Yeah.
I'm not Coach Troxel, I'm not Mr. Troxel. And that's been good because we can kind of look to those times and, really use that time effectively.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would say my wife has been my rock, through this, and it's a big change for her, and she's taken it like a champ. And I know it's not easy, but I mean, I couldn't coach if she wasn't right there beside me.
Yeah. What is your coaching philosophy? Is it the same as your teaching philosophy, or how do the two differ?
I think they complement one another really well. Maybe it's cliche, but you know what? It's who I am. I believe that our role and our responsibility as football coaches and just coaches in general is to make the next generation better. Better men, better husbands, better fathers, things like that. And I think that once you figure out how to make the kid the best version of themselves, a lot of the things that happen on the field will take care of themselves. If I get a kid to buy in and believe in himself and work his tail off in the off season, okay, now my scheme is going to work a lot better, as opposed to just focusing on being the best football player that you can be. And so I think when we talk about kind of balance before, when I approach this program and approach coaching kids, it's one hand being a good person, on the other point, really kind of being the best football player that you can be. Because these kids also got to find that balance of who are they, on the field, and who are they in the classroom and in the community. And so we do quite a bit, not only with off-season training, but we do a lot of community work as well. And I think these kids are starting to see that, they have a very positive impact on their community, and it's something they hadn't seen maybe before.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. How would you say coming into coaching, was it the same, or has it kind of changed and morphed over time?
Honestly, I don't think so. I think what you're going to find out, especially for aspiring coaches, or young coaches, is that you'll change. I remember my first 4 years. I mean, I was the yeller, I was the screamer, I demanded kids. I mean, we went back and forth. And honestly, what was I doing? I thought, here I am. These kids are maybe getting a little stressed, or scared, and we need to teach. I think somebody said it before that good coaches teach, and how the adage goes.
Yeah.
And anyways, and so I took a couple years off to have a couple kids and get my master's degree. When I came back, it was totally different. And so my focus more or less is just making sure that I'm teaching kids and until they understand what's going on. Because I mean, if I demand and they don't know, I mean, that's not helping either of us. I'm getting elevated, they're getting frustrated, and it's not a good experience.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% agree. This is kind of circling back a little bit to teaching, but obviously you're biased and I'm biased, but on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being worthless and 10 being the most useful people in the world, how important are teachers in your opinion?
47.
Yeah.
I think there's no other career that's rewarding like this. I mean, you get the opportunity to connect with kids every day. And some of these kids are going to hold on to what you say is gospel, and they're going to take that and they're going to run with that. And I think that, our responsibility as educators is very important, to make sure that these kids are equipped for whatever life is going to throw at them, and unfortunately some kids embrace that and some don't, but you do the best you can with that. But I think that education is a very effective career. It's a very effective mechanism for maintaining social stability. And I think we're starting to see that now with this pandemic, is that, teachers or schools in general oftentimes provided that stability more than just the content, more than that kind of that emotional and kind of that relational well-being as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a forgotten aspect of high school is the emotional and social part of it, because that's almost just as big, if not bigger, as the academic side of things. So is there any advice for any coach or teacher watching this, old, new, and even me who's going into this? Would you have any advice for that person?
I think just be you. The world's going to tell you this is how you need to be as an effective teacher in the classroom. you know, an effective coach on the field, the mat, the court, whatever that might be, you know, I would ask you not to compromise your values. Figure out who you are, look internally, figure out why you love athletics or why you love teaching in general, and just make sure that those things, those values are amplified, you know, as you go forward.
Yeah.
I'll never forget some of the best advice I got was from a retired teacher when I was doing my pre-service program. And he said, you know what, in 10, 20 years, these kids aren't going to remember the content that you taught them. They're going to remember if you cared or not. So be authentic, be genuine, develop that rapport, be demanding, you know, don't be their friend.
Yeah.
But just be you in that process.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Are there any last thoughts, any things, any discussion topics or anything like that you want to get into?
Oh boy, Sam, maybe that's for another time. Talk international politics or something like that.
Yeah, we could. Another podcast.
I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and just kind of talk a little bit about my story. I love my time in Fort Madison. I'm having a blast right now, and I couldn't be happier with kind of where my journey's taken me.
Yeah.
Still a lot of unanswered questions about the next 5-10 years, you know, what that looks like, but I'm enjoying it right now.
Yeah, and we, us Fort Madison people are grateful as a community that you were here, that you taught our kids. You were a great coach, and we're also thankful that you moved on to a place that you're really happy, and that yeah, you're making a difference there where you grew up, and that's amazing too.
It's fun. You'll find out. There's more joy, I think, in coaching than playing.
Yeah.
It's different, but it's a blast.
All righty. So thank you so much for coming on, and thank you guys for watching. That was Coach Andrew Troxel.